Hello, Rabbi Sacks.
Hello there. Whoa.
Rabbi Lord
This is
Sacks.
fun, isn't it? Oh my goodness me. What's the weather like in Bal Harbour, Florida?
It's humid as usual, but very nice. We're enjoying
Wonderful
it.
to be with you both.
How's the weather in London?
Believe it or not, it's quite nice.
For a change.
Yeah, I mean, the weather in Britain is a major element in British political history because it's usually so miserable that nobody can have the energy to revolt. So it's kept us a very peaceful country. It's damp and cold and wet, but today it's actually looking quite nice.
Oh, a silver lining.
Good. Yes. And how are you?
Pardon?
And how are you?
Yeah, waiting for this thing to go. I think we're all a little bit impatient now, but we have to be very careful because we've seen this second spike, especially in Israel, where it's been very serious. So, you know, it's uncertain times. And I think it's going to be a Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur like no other. So we're just going to have to try and create an atmosphere under very difficult conditions. And how with you?
Thank God, doing well. We are very honored that you have taken the time to speak with us. And we are grateful that you are here on our podcast and are very excited to bring the conversation to our listeners around the globe and many of them who live in the UK. I don't know if...
Great to be with you. Great to be with you.
It really is an honor and a pleasure. I don't know if you know, but I just wanted to tell you that my parents had the pleasure of hosting you.
Of course.
Okay.
Yossel and Stera, of course.
Yes.
We did some stuff together. We laid the foundations for something or other, and we did all sorts of stuff together.
Yeah, you ate Shabbat dinner in Australia. I was living in New York, but I heard all about it, and you made such an impact at the groundbreaking of 770 in Australia and at my grandfather, Rabbi Chaim Gutnick's yard site when you spoke there, and it really had a great impact on my family and the whole community.
Well, please give your parents my very, very best.
I will.
They are both remarkable in quite different ways.
Yes, thank you. They'll be listening.
Yes, and speaking of impact, you've had a global impact in many ways and have inspired so many people. We have both been so inspired by you and so grateful that you're here. And I'm sure our listeners will be very glad to hear the insight that you have to share. We wanted you to start, if you can, share with us and our listeners, how does a young Jewish boy from Cambridge University with no plans of becoming a rabbi or a leader become an internationally recognized rabbi, global icon, and world leader?
That's a good question. Give me the answer. I haven't got a clue. I don't know.
we know.
I'll tell you what happened. 1967, my first year as a university student, Six-Day War, had an enormous impact on all of us. It changed the Jewish world. Changed Natan Sharansky. It changed Russian Jewry. We were all changed. But I couldn't do very much with it at the time. And so I had to wait for a year. And that next summer, when I'd finished my second year at university, I decided I am going to explore what it is to be Jewish. And my first stop was, believe it or not, the United States, because I knew that there were many brilliant rabbis in the United States. I had a long list of them. For $100, I was able to buy a Greyhound bus ticket, unlimited travel across the States. And so for that summer, that's what I did. I traveled around the States meeting rabbis. And almost every rabbi I met said to me, and not only Orthodox rabbis, said to me, there's one rabbi you must meet, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So after about 10 people had said this to me, I thought, okay, where is he? And they said, well, he's 770 Eastern Parkway. So I took the subway to Eastern Parkway. I walked into 770, and being full of chutzpah, I said, I am a student from Cambridge University who has come 3,000 miles to meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Please, could I have an appointment? And they all fell about laughing. They said, do you realize how many thousands of people are waiting to see the Rebbe? Come back next year, 10 years, come back later. So I said, well, look, I can't tell you where I'm going to be because I'm going to take a bus around America. I don't know where I'll be. But I do know that I have an aunt in Los Angeles. And if the Rebbe is able to see me, please ring this number. And so I traveled around America, reached Los Angeles. And one Sunday night, the phone went. And it was somebody in 770 saying, the Rebbe will see you on Thursday night. Now, I had absolutely no money. And the only way of getting from Los Angeles to New York is to take a non-stop Greyhound bus, which took 72 hours in those days. Probably takes a bit longer these days. I do not necessarily recommend a non-stop 72 hours on a Greyhound bus, but I arrived at 770 Thursday evening, and eventually I got to see the Rebbe. We had a yechidus lasting 20-25 minutes, and that was a life-changing experience. Not the only life-changing one, but a very significant one, where the Rebbe really challenged me to become a leader in Jewish life in Cambridge University. The interesting thing, have you ever seen a film of Verbringen?
Yes.
You know what it
Absolutely
looks like?
have.
Of course, yes.
He would speak for 4 or 5 hours, usually in sections of about 20 minutes. And then they would all sing a nigun. And the guys told me, since I was going back the next day, I was going back the next Sunday, that when you leave, you have to go up to the Rebbe with a bottle of vodka and pour him a little bit of vodka, and he says l'chaim, and then you take that bottle with you, and that's the Rebbe's vodka. So this is what happened on my last day, or what was supposed to be my last day in New York. I went up to the Rebbe while they were singing a nigun, and he looked at me. What's this? I said, I'm going. He said, why? I said, because I've got to get back to Cambridge University. And he looked at me and he said in these words, but the Cambridge University term does not begin until the second week in October.
Wow.
I think you should stay. Well, everyone was watching this because the Rebbe did not normally engage in conversations in the middle of Verbringen. So by the time I got back to my place, everyone wanted to know, what did the Rebbe say? What did the Rebbe say? And I'm afraid I didn't realize what I was doing because I was new to Chabad. And I'm afraid I told them. I said, the Rebbe says I should stay, but I can't, I've got to go. Well, I should have realized that when the Hasidim heard that the Rebbe said you should stay, you stay. So one way or another, when it came to the next day, they managed to make sure I couldn't get out of 770.
I'm sure.
And go to the airport. I said, no, seriously, I've got to go. I can't get back. This is not a regular ticket. It's a charter flight. They said, don't worry, we've phoned already and we've told them you're ill. I've said, but I'm not ill. They said to me, you are. And tomorrow morning, we're going to the Rebbe's doctor to find out what illness you have. Which they did. They did. They took me to the Rebbe's doctor. And he went through a list of about 100 illnesses, none of which I'd had, until finally he got to jaundice. And I said, yeah, I had jaundice 10 years ago. He wrote down recurrence of jaundice.
Oh my.
So that is how in 1968, I met the Rebbe, and I was with the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah, and I heard the Rebbe blow shofar. Now, these are life-changing experiences, and that is how it all happened. That is how it all began. Right. It took many years to work its way through, but that's how it began.
As Chabad women, we were inspired by a beautiful statement you made about the Rebbe. You said, this was not a man who was interested in creating followers. This was a man who was passionate about creating leaders. How can we apply these principles of leadership today in the age of technology and social media?
You ask a difficult question, because if you want to change someone's life, don't do it by social media. This is a real I-thou, face-to-face experience. And yes, you'll keep your 2 meters distance or whatever. But there are certain things you really can't do other than face-to-face. You can't fulfill the mitzvah of listening to shofar by listening on Zoom. It can't be done. You know, you've got to be there in that famous phrase from Hamilton, in the room where it happens.
In the room where it happened, yes.
Yeah. So it's really, really difficult, but there's a big plus to social media. I mean, many pluses. Number one, you can reach people across the world, which is really and truly incredible. And yes. Chabad were the first people who used modern communications technology, cable television, satellite television, that kind of thing. They used it way, way before anyone else. And the other thing, which I'm not an expert on, but here it is. I have 2 brothers living in Jerusalem. So when I was in Jerusalem, I would always go with my brother to the local shul. It's called the Shtiblach. It's a little cluster of shuls in Katamon. And for 22 years, I was chief rabbi of Britain and the Commonwealth. And yet when I was in shul, almost nobody came up and said Shabbat Shalom.
Wow.
I was in the shul on Chol Hamoed Sukkot last year, and almost everyone came up and said Chag Sameach. And I was trying to work out how come for 22 years they didn't, and suddenly they did. And I realized the answer: WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
You know, I'd been doing a daily WhatsApp.
Yeah.
From the beginning of Elul all the way through. And for some reason, people found WhatsApp very direct and very intimate. They told me they felt as if I was speaking to them. So it's clear that each of these technologies has a particular strength.
Right.
And I was amazed that WhatsApp turned out to be more powerful than being chief rabbi.
Well,
interesting.
It's amazing how you channeled social media and technology. And I think that we all have the opportunity to channel it in a positive way and use it for the benefit of all of us. I wanted to ask you, just going back a little bit, when the Rebbe told you that you in some way were destined to be a leader, and he really brought out the leadership qualities in you, it's not something that you had initially planned. Were there any times or any moments where you felt a reluctance or doubt or difficulties, challenges? And, you know, and if so, how did you get through them?
Elaine, my wife.
I love that.
Full stop. It's the beginning, middle, and end. Elaine believed in me all the way through. she has such a radiant disposition that she never got depressed, even when things were very, very depressing. And I couldn't have done it without her, full stop. I mean, it's ridiculous to even think of it. And I'm very touched by that, because when Elaine and I met, when we got engaged, when we got married, there wasn't the slightest hint that I might become a rabbi. I mean, it just wasn't on the agenda. And so this was completely unexpected for Elaine. And in the end, it was the chen, it was the resilience and the grace of her personality that took me through it.
That's very special. You're lucky. You're a lucky man.
Well, I should say, you know, it didn't take me long. As soon as I noticed Elaine, and of course I met Elaine pretty much as soon as I came back from the Rebbe. This was all happening at the same time. And so it was one of those years, 1968.
Well, they say a man's success has much to do with the woman in his life, and I guess this holds very true for you. And you recently celebrated a wedding anniversary, I hear, a big one, 50 years.
Yeah.
Golden Mazal
I mean,
Tov.
we would have got married much earlier, but I just wanted to go to yeshiva, to Kfar Chabad, before we got married. And so we put it off by a year or two. We met in November 68 and we got married in July 70. But we really would have got married much, much sooner otherwise. And of course, Elaine was the role Elaine helped me with was really secondary. The role that was primary was the strength she gave our children. You know, when you are a public figure, that is very challenging because your children become kind of public figures. Yeah. And that can be very difficult for them. And it was Elaine who kept them stable and positive and who helped them become strong people in their own right. And that was really important. That was the most important.
Beside, not behind, beside every great man is a greater woman or great woman.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Nobody can doubt that that's how we do things.
I wanted to just go back to the social media for a moment because you were talking about WhatsApp, but the fact is that in today's world, most people are on Instagram and Facebook. So we do want to find a way to be able to, like you say about the Rebbe's quote, to be able to be an influencer and create influences rather than be an influencer creating followers. Do you think there is a way to do that within Instagram and Facebook?
Look, I don't know those media well enough. We use them. I don't understand them well enough.
We follow you.
I'm from an earlier generation.
Right.
But just understand the following formula. And this is what I discovered in my life. That I had the great privilege of coming to know well and work with people who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And that's what you have to do. You have to really and truly believe in people more than they believe in themselves. A lot of people have internal doubts. Even when they achieve considerable success, they suffer from something called the imposter syndrome. You know, people think I'm really good, but actually I'm really bad, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it's the strength of your belief in them. I have long said that religion is less about our faith in God than about God's faith in us.
Yes.
I continue to be moved almost beyond words by the way Hashem does believe in us, does empower us, put his image on each of us, made each of us his emissary. And that's really the thing to get hold of. Believe in people more than they believe in themselves.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm very honored to have your PDF newly released book, Morality, and it is brilliant. I stayed up nights.
PDF. Very good.
Yes, I'm very honored.
The real thing is better.
Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times. We know it's a bestseller in the UK, and it is very relevant during these trying times. And one thing that stood out to us throughout your book is how we have become an I generation as opposed to a we generation. Can you expand on this and share how we can practically shift from I to we?
Yeah. You know, when I tried to understand what the Lubavitcher Rebbe was doing, it was something extraordinary because nobody had ever done this before. Nobody in the whole history of Judaism had ever done an outreach campaign before, with the possible exception of Rabbi Moses of Coucy in France in the 14th century in relation to mezuzah and tefillah. That was the only precedent we could find. And I was thinking to myself, you know, Jews for 20, 30 centuries held back from this. And why did the Rebbe not? And I suddenly realized at a certain point that there was a kind of arithmetic here. Imagine you have a certain amount of wealth or power. You have, let's say, $1,000, and you decide to share that with 9 other people. How much do you have left? Answer, 1/10 of what you began with. You have total power. You decide to share that with 9 other people. How much do you have left? 1/10 of the power with which you began. But if you are dealing with something else, like love or friendship or trust or even knowledge, and you share that with 9 other people, how much do you have? You don't have less. You may have more. You may even have 10 times as much. And I suddenly realized that is the difference between material goods and spiritual goods. Material goods, the more you share, the less you have. But spiritual goods, the more you share, the more you have. And that is why material goods, wealth, and power lead to competition. I don't want to have less, I want to have more. And therefore you have these 2 arenas in society for competition. One is the market economy, the competition for wealth. The other is the political system, the competition for power. And when it's competition, it's all about I. It's all about self-interest. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But society needs something else as well. It needs an arena of cooperation. It needs an arena in which we are concerned with other people's interests, not just ours, where we really think as a we. And the truth is, all the spiritual goods are like that. Friendship, love, influence, knowledge, etc., etc. And that is what I call morality. Morality is whenever I say somebody else's interests count as much as mine. That's called altruism. And what's happened is we always had such a thing. It's just in the last half century we've lost it. We've really lost it. So that all that really matters today is economics and politics, and forget the rest. We're in a competition for wealth and power, and don't bother me with other people who need something, because let them go to the government for it.
Right.
And that is a total and absolute disaster. So, you know, I suddenly realized the Rebbe understood this as far as Judaism was concerned. Chabad is all about we. I embrace you. even though you're not like me. You may keep less than me, you may know less than me, it doesn't matter. You're part of this collective us. I'm going to share my Judaism, and the more I share, the more I have. And likewise, in general with society, I am going to share my concern with the common good, and the end result will be the more I share, the more we will have. And you won't get something like Black Lives Matter, when a whole group of people feel we are left out, and ditto Hispanics and ditto who knows what. You will get a situation in which people will realize we are part of something that's bigger than us, but which cares for us.
Yeah, I think the Rebbe also went even further in that he helped us take the physical elements and elevate them into spiritual realms.
Oh, 100%.
And giving tzedakah and, the tangible goods that we have. If we give those away, then we elevate them in the spiritual realm, and we can, and that brings more tzedakah, and that brings more blessings into our lives.
A lot of medical research on this, that giving is a fundamental way of getting healthier. It strengthens the immune system. It combats depression. An enormous amount of medical research in the last 10 years that when you give, you gain more than you give.
Yes.
You had, in relation to the I and the we, and how we can practically shift from I to we to more of the we. How you had shared, I had heard you share that one of the ways to do that is by sharing our stories. What other way, like sharing in general, like we share the Pesach story at the Seder, you had mentioned Hamilton, by people sharing their stories, that helps shift to the we. Can you expand on that, and how else?
I'll tell you something. This is one of the more unusual things I ever did. It took place in 1974 or 1975. I can't remember when, but either one of those years. The Smicha class of Jews College Rabbinical Seminary of Britain, and the top class of Montreux Yeshiva, I don't think it exists anymore, but it did then, engaged in Switzerland, halfway up a mountain, with a group of African bishops to fight anti-Semitism in Africa. And so we're halfway up a mountain, and we have these 3 days of interfaith dialogue. It was very rare for me to take part in them, but this one, my own teacher thought I ought to do it. And it was very cognitive. That, the word cognitive, it's the English word for boring. And and so I thought to myself, this is great, we're all giving each other lectures, but nothing's really changing. So on the last night, I arranged with the bishops and the bocharim that we were going to have a febreng. And the African bishops didn't know what a febreng is, and I explained we brought in some vodka, some whiskey, some cake. And I said, we are going to tell you our stories. And then you are going to tell us your stories. And you are going to teach us your songs. And we are going to teach you our songs. We sat there from 10 in the evening till 3 in the morning. And then we danced around the room. And I suddenly realized this incredible power of sharing stories and sharing songs that allowed us to bridge what was, in every sense, a major cultural abyss. These people, we couldn't have been less alike. But because we had songs we shared and stories we shared, we really reached this beautiful, beautiful, serene moment that was probably life-changing for most of the people there.
Yeah, you mentioned
This,
people not like us are just like us. And that's very much related to this story of recognizing that we're more alike than we are different, and bridging the divide that we're experiencing today that seems to be getting worse and worse by sharing our common ground and talking to each other, even if we feel like we don't have anything in common. It's likely that we have a lot more in common than we think. Rivkah, do you agree?
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Rabbi Taub had shared a quote. What was the quote again? Hold on a second. It reminded me of that, of people not like us are just like us. We're
all alike in that we are different.
We are all different in that we are all the same, and that we are all the same in that we are all different.
So I wanted to move on to your chapter in your new book on self-help was fascinating and refreshing, and we loved reading your perspective on self-help. I'm a big self-help book reader, or at least I have been. And in it, you write, in that chapter, you write, "I have felt the fear and done it anyway. I have refrained from sweating the small stuff. I've experienced the life-changing magic of tidying. I know the power of now," and so forth. And you continue stating that you do have some experience in the self-help world, reading self-help books, but what you found time and time again is that help comes not from the self, but from others. And I'm wondering if you can expand on this concept and, you know, the notion that self-help in many ways is no help at all.
I was very struck by the statement in the Gemara, Ein chavush matiret atzmo mibeit ha'asurim. A prisoner cannot release himself from prison. You know, somebody else has to turn the key. And that seemed to me very much the case on something like depression, for example. Depression, unless you're just treating it chemically, unless you're just taking antidepressants, you cannot get yourself out of that state. You need somebody else to help you do so. And this was always very clear to me, but the example I gave, of course, I'm not going to tell the story in detail, came from our honeymoon when I very nearly drowned. And
yes, I read that.
Yeah, I mean, it's too, I still find that a bit too scary to tell that story terribly often. But, you know, I mean, I said, well, you know, I went under for the 5th time and there was no one near. And this was in Italy. And I said, I remember my last 2 thoughts. You know, number 1, what a way to begin a honeymoon. And number 2 was the Italian for help, you know. But clearly somebody saw me and saved me and so on. Thank
God.
But, you know, self-help was absolutely no use at the time. None whatsoever. I was drowning and I needed somebody to hold my hand and pull me out. And I think a lot of our personal problems do tend to be like that. Now, obviously self-help is real and important, and it's what Hillel meant when he said, Im ein ani li mi li, if I am not for myself, who will be? So clearly we have to work on things ourselves. Nobody else can solve our problems for us. But it does really need somebody else to, as it were, metaphorically hold our hand when we manage to get to dry land. I you know, and I don't think these things are stressed often enough in the self-help literature. It's wonderful literature, no criticism of it, but it does leave out the fact that we need somebody else to take us out of that locked room.
Yeah. It reminds me of the paradox. You can't do it yourself and you can't do it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that example that you gave of you in Italy and drowning was beautiful. It really touched me in the book, and it's very poignant.
You mentioned
in the end, it's other people who help shape your life. While all this was going on, for instance, in 1968, I was very struck because everything from that period in my life is very heightened. And there was an English pop group called the Beatles. And these four singers managed to be the finest pop musicians in the history of popular music. But in 68, they started breaking down. 1970, they split apart. And these four brilliant people never really managed a single brilliant piece of music afterwards for the rest of their lives. So, for me, there's even a simple thing like creativity. You have to have somebody who's willing to be there with you. Did you ever read the story of those two Israeli economists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky? You came across them?
Sure, yeah. The Judgment Under Uncertainty. Fascinating work.
They were the creators of behavioral economics. And Michael Lewis has a book about them called The Undoing Project. These two people just sparked brilliant ideas off one another. And they would spend hours every single day just talking. And that's why they were able to do what they did. This kind of myth of the lonely creator is exactly what it is. By and large, it's a myth. And we need that collaborative creativity. The Gemara in Ketubot tells us that Rabbi Yochanan had it with Reish Lakish and so on. These were partnerships that were immensely creative. But sitting on your own doesn't help.
Yeah, partnership and mentorship as well. And speaking of mentorship, do you have a mentor, or you mentioned earlier that you refer to someone when you have a question? Is there a person for you, or a few people, and if so, who would that be?
We'd love to know.
I used to have two people who were very much senior to me. My own teacher, who died this summer very sadly, Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and an American Rosh Yeshiva for whom I had a very high regard. I'm not going to name him. And these were people that I would turn to, as I would turn to the late Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, Zatzal. And they were the kind of people I would turn to. But be aware that we have just lost some major figures from our world. Most obviously, in addition to Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, Rabbi Aydin Steinsaltz.
Right.
And we're just coming up to the Shloshim, I think. And the American Rabbi, Dr. Norman Lamb, Zatzal, who was head of Yeshiva University. So we have lost, in the space of 3 months, some of the great teachers of our time. I always take advice on things, but I don't have mentors as such at this point.
You are the mentor.
Yes, you're the mentor. And what's special about the Rebbe is that we can learn through his teachings. He's still a mentor to us because we have his sichas, we have his teachings that we follow. So I guess we can still have mentors like you have in yours, even though they have passed on.
The first book I ever wrote is a book that you may have seen called Torah Studies. It was translations into English or adaptations into English of the Rebbe's Sichas. So it meant that in 1973, when I wrote it, I was working very much on the inside, if you know what I mean, working out the Rebbe's thought patterns. And I found that extremely helpful. So very early on, as it were, I didn't just read the Rebbe from the outside. I tried to read him from the inside as well.
That's very meaningful, special.
So as a leader, today you are a mentor for thousands of people around the world. And I wonder, does that come with any sense of self-doubt or second thoughts about taking on such a significant role that carries such heavy responsibility to speak for the Jewish nation as a whole, sometimes in settings that are anti-Semitic? I mean, I can't imagine the challenge that you face. And I know that having family support is a big part of, staying sane, but is there anything else that you do? Are there feelings of self-doubt? And if so, how do you get through those feelings?
I should say I have feelings of self-doubt every single day, possibly every single hour. You kind of recognize them by now.
Wow, that is very comforting to hear that Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks has self-doubts every hour. I would never have thought.
I think it's important for people to know that, we're untapped resources, many of whom are afraid to, tap into the strengths and the talents that we have and use them. And I think hearing from someone who has achieved so much that it is possible and that self-doubt is a part of the process, I think is very important. It's very important.
Self-doubt is actually terribly important because it helps you as far as possible. Just to stay sane. Don't think too much of yourself. Second thing it does is that it encourages you to reach out to people. People who represent very different vantage points from you. And we kind of do that with almost everything we do. We take somebody there, somebody there, somebody there, somebody there, somebody on the right, somebody on the left, somebody on the, et cetera, et cetera. We use that technique because I realize, and virtually everything I write, even a script for a radio broadcast, will be seen by other people. And virtually everything that I do, somebody will raise a question. Is that right? Are you sure that's right? Is that the best way of expressing it? And rather get it right first than get it wrong and then have to apologize. Yes. And then, I've just got a wonderful, amazing team, a tiny team of 3 people that consist of people that I really, really respect and admire. Always work with people with the very highest moral standards. And then, you can feel pretty sure that you won't go wrong.
Yeah, win the respect of people you respect.
Yeah.
That's such great advice. Thank you for sharing that here.
But also, there is that element of self-doubt. But on the other hand, there's also this being so strong in your values and true to your faith. And there's somewhat of a dichotomy there, where there's that uncertainty, looking to others for guidance, but at the same time being so strong in your Judaism and your faith, no matter where you go. And so how do you do that? How does one stay strong in their faith today?
It's very simple, but you'll have to have a leap of faith here, because it's not the way things are in America, and it's not the way things are anywhere nowadays. But way, 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 way back in Anglo Jewry, nobody wore a yarmulke in the street. It just wasn't done. And I mean, nobody. And I remember, and Jews kept a low profile. And I remember in our summer holidays, we were just walking back to our apartment from the shul. There was a shul in the seaside resort. And I was walking back and I was wearing my yarmulke. And a member of the congregation saw me and came to the conclusion, obviously, that I had not realized, I'd just forgotten to remove it. And he came up to my father, Oliver Shalom, and said to him, Mr. Sacks, your son is wearing a yarmulke. And my father looked at the man and said, no son of mine will ever be ashamed to be a Jew in public. You hear that when you're 5, 6 years old, changes your world.
Sure.
I just knew from him, never be ashamed at who you are. Never be ashamed of what you believe. So that's how it happened. Very easy.
Yeah, very important for our younger generation, especially
Yes.
to hear this.
Rosh Hashanah is always a time to reevaluate and reassess. Does it have particular meaning this year during the pandemic and the challenges we face in the world today?
Well, I think it does, really. You know, we tend to take things for granted. I once did a little experiment called the black dot. You know the black dot experiment?
Where it's close to your face and appears larger than it is?
Now, here it goes. I used to put a black dot on a piece of white paper and ask an audience, what do they see? And everyone in the audience said a black dot. I said, now look at this piece of paper. That black dot represents less than 1% of the paper. The 99% is the white paper,
Right.
but you didn't notice it. So that is how we are conditioned. We are conditioned to notice the discrepant and take the rest for granted. So we notice all the bad things that happen in the world, but we ignore all the good things that happen in the world. And I think halakha, the siddur, is a place for doing the opposite. I call it foregrounding the background. So when we do Birkot HaShachar, we thank Hashem for making the cock crow, for putting a ground under our feet, for giving us clothes to wear, for having eyes to see, etc. All the things we normally take for granted come Birkot HaShachar, and they foreground those things instead of leaving them in the background. So I think the most important spiritual thing is to look at the beauty and the miracle of all the stuff we normally take for granted. Now, what has happened for the last 6 months? Every single one of us has been in a situation of sakanat nefashot. We've been in mortal danger. Every individual on the face of the earth, more or less. We have had a situation in which almost 1 million people have died. A terrifying, but terrifying situation in which we never know where's it going to come from next, and so on and so forth. This pandemic should make us stop taking life for granted. And that's what Rosh Hashanah is about. Zochreinu l'chaim, melech hofetz v'chaim, v'kosvenu b'sefer ha'chaim, v'mancho Elokim ha'chaim. Remember us for life, God who delights in life and writes in the book of life. Judaism is about not taking life for granted. You know, when we get a new suit, what bracha do we make? Thank you, God, for making a new suit? No, we make a bracha of Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'yigiyanu. Thank you for keeping me alive. The whole of Judaism is don't take life for granted. Life is a miracle. And that's what we should be feeling right now from the pandemic. Nature has been telling us, look at the miracle of life and the vulnerability of life. Number one, the miracle of life. There is a prize, I won it 4 years ago, called the Templeton Prize. This year's winner is a scientist called Neil, forgotten his name for one moment. Language of God by, forgotten his name for the moment. You'll look it up.
We'll look it up.
This is the man who ran the program to map the human genome. When he began, he's not Jewish. When he began mapping the human genome, he was an atheist. By the time he finished, he was a religious believer. Yeah?
Wow.
He wrote about this. He called his book The Language of God. Sorry, his name is?
1 second.
Francis Collins. Francis Collins.
Well,
So
speaking of...
Francis Collins, through pure science, was turned from an atheist to a believer. And that's the physical basis of life. The spiritual basis of life, as you know, the Rambam says, God gives us one thing, but it's everything. God gives us life. And to my mind, the key text this year is from Tefillah Lamoshe, Psalm 90. Teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Let us realize how precious every single day of life is, and how we must give thanks for it. I would say, do that one thing, and you will be spiritually really uplifted, really uplifted.
One thing that stood out to me was something you said in a video that I watched. It was a video on the Rebbe. And you said some of the most transformative moments in a person's life happen when someone believes in them more than they believe in themselves. And I think your story is a testament to that being so true. And I think that there is so much to be said about believing in each other and believing in ourselves and doing the things that we believe we can do to make a difference, a positive difference in the world, because every little action can make a tremendous difference. I wanted to ask if you have a favorite book that you can recommend. I know you've probably read thousands of books, but is there one that stood out to you that you enjoyed?
Well, the one that certainly changed my life, but it also changed about 15 million other lives as well, was the book written by the late Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
Which he published actually just a year after leaving Auschwitz, surviving Auschwitz. And it's called Man's Search for Meaning. And
it's our favorite too.
Yeah, it's almost everyone's favorite book, and it's a life-changing book. And basically it contains one message above all others, which is there is one freedom that they can never take away from you. And that is the freedom to choose how to respond.
The freedom to choose one's own way.
Yeah. And I find that, of course, that's a profoundly Jewish message, profoundly Jewish message. Even the phrase, man's search for meaning, is profoundly Jewish. Judaism is the search for meaning. It's not the search for salvation. It's not the search for submission. It's not the search for domination. It's the search for meaning. So I think Viktor Frankl is the giant, and his book is my most important book.
Well, we were going to ask you if you can share a favorite quote. You did just share a beautiful quote. You just did. I started off telling you about my parents, and it just comes to mind. I remember my father said to us that the last time he saw you, you remembered my mother had asked you a question: why do bad things happen to good people? And you said to my father, tell your wife I still don't have an answer for her. I was wondering if you had any more insight.
Yes, I do, actually.
Oh.
God does not want us to understand why bad things happen to good people. Because if we ever understood, we would be forced to accept that bad things happen to good people. And God does not want us to accept those bad things. He wants us not to understand so that we will fight against the bad and the injustices of this world. And that is why there is no answer to that question, because God has arranged that we shall never have an answer to it.
Well, may you continue to be a light unto the nations and continue shining your light and fighting the injustice that is everywhere. And we want to thank you for everything you've done and everything that you continue to do today on behalf of really humanity and on behalf of the Jewish community. And we are so inspired by everything you've done. Thank you so, so much. And huge blessings for a happy and sweet and peaceful new year with only good tidings and blessings and health to your family and everybody around you.
Yes, kseva v'chasima tova to you.
May Hashem give you both a year of health and blessing and safety, and may do likewise to everyone who's tuning into this conversation. And may He give us some light after a quite dark period in time. And may we emerge from the darkness full of joy. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Your book on morality has already brought so much light.
As well as all the many other books that you've written, many of which we have, To Heal a Fractured World, and your books on the Parsha, on ethics, covenant and conversation. We will have in the podcast notes, we're going to include a link for your current book and how people can get in touch with you. But if you can share, how can our listeners find you? Where can they find you?
Joanna?
Yeah. I just want to add that your book has come out in a very dark time, and that's why particularly this book on morality I think is so relevant for this dark time, and it has brought a lot of light to me. I know it's going to bring a lot of light to thousands and thousands of people.
Yes, it's called Morality: Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks.
Great. And Joanna is going to give you all the contact details, okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.